Okay, folks, this next story I have involves a good friend of mine, Byron Allen. Now, Byron was an IP at Laughlin when this took place, and he was out flying with a student. I can't remember if it was a contact sortie or what, but at any rate, when they took off, the weather was actually pretty good. But during the time they were up flying, the weather began to close in on the field. Now, Laughlin sits on the Rio Grande River there at Del Rio, Texas. And so while Byron's out doing his air work, the weather begins to drop a lot quicker than anybody anticipated. Out in West Texas, these things just happen. Actually, they happen in Oklahoma, they happen in Arizona, and just about anywhere else. But at any rate, it's just one of the things we put up with. So the weather's dropping, and Byron's heading back to the base, and as quick as he can, and they end up shooting an instrument approach. Well, by this time, the weather dropped to 100 1/4, and they come in on approach and can't find the runway. So they execute a go around and come back for another approach, and by this time, they're getting really, really low on gas, to the point where if they can't find the runway, they'll have to make an emergency divert to Kelly Air Force Base and be in a real world of hurt at that time. Well, that's what happened. So on their missed approach, Byron executed what we used to call a min-nozzle climb, and climbed to 43,000 feet or thereabouts, and then slowly began the descent into Kelly at the max range airspeed, max range glide speed, whatever it was. Anyway, the other thing that he did is once he got to altitude, totally against Air Force regulations at the time, was he shut both engines down. Now, at the time, we had DC radios, which operated off the battery, so he was good for the time that he was going to be in the airplane. And so he starts back downhill with both engines out. This was not a big deal because at our glide speed, 240 knots, there was enough windmilling RPM to keep the hydraulic pumps providing hydraulic pressure to the flight controls. He had DC radios, so all was good. So, excuse me, still dealing with this dumbass Chicom virus. But anyway, he comes coasting in, and about 10 miles from the airfield, they light the engines off. They both start up. He was able to configure, come in, land, and when he taxied clear of the runway, one of the engines shut down, and I think he made it to the chocks before the other engine shut down. And that's one of those kind of missions. You just get out, climb down the ladder, quietly kiss the ground, and go about business as if nothing happened. At any rate, I love Byron for telling me that story, because it differentiates between the spirit of an aviator and a pilot. Now, it's a very, very small distinction in a lot of people's eyes, but to me it speaks volumes. An aviator would have that presence of mind how to fly that jet under those circumstances. A pilot might just sit there and fly it, knowing it was against Air Force regulations to shut down two perfectly good engines while in flight. But an aviator recognized options he had and went with them. And by the time Byron got to 43,000 feet, he essentially owned the jet. Because if he left both motors running, it was doubtful whether or not he would have made it to Kelly. And he and the student probably would have had to jump out. So doing what he did saved the Air Force a jet, but he couldn't say anything about it because, again, the actions he took were strictly against Air Force regulations. So God love you, Byron, for that story. Take care, folks.